Before I tell my story, I need to sound this as a warning to married men. You can't trust your friends with your wife. It is impossible. It is wrong, and it can cost you your marriage. Just as it cost me mine. My ex-husband found this out, but when he did, it was too late. My name is Sarah, and this is how I lost the love of my life to a series of intense and mind-blowing pleasure. Although I'm on my third husband now, I have not found a man that will love me as pure and beautifully as my first husband did. Steve was my happily ever after, and with him I felt the safest. Steve and I grew up together, with Charlie. We were the three musketeers, inseparable. I was the only girl amongst two boys, but we would not have had it any other way. Charlie was the authoritative leader of the pack, Steve was the calm and smart one, and I was the glue that held our friendship together. We went from children to teenagers in the twinkle of an eye. Steve and I became closer than normal, and soon enough, we started dating. Charles became a little distant from me when we found out. Little did I know that he had feelings for me. Our young love bloomed like roses in spring, and as we had planned, we got married after college. I wish I could say we lived happily ever after. I really wish. The first 3 years of our marriage was a fairy tale. More than a fairy tale, it was heaven. Steve, now my husband, gave me the world. He was caring, thoughtful, and very intentional about everything that concerned me. And though the sex was not special, the goodness of his heart coupled with the peace he gave me was enough covering. Steve gave me peace, in this world with a plethora of chaos. I remember our first vacation to Rome in Italy. We visited the Trevi Fountain and Pantheon, but the highlight was our night out in a club. The barista asked if we were together, and when we replied yes, she brought 2 cups of what I would later come to know as their most potent aphrodisiac. Steve and I gulped it down at once, and it took effect almost immediately. He took me to the toilet first for a quickie, and then we made our way to our room. It was a night of senseless and sweet lovemaking, one I will never forget in a hurry. I still hoped we had stayed back in Rome because that was the last beautiful night we spent together. Things began to fall into pieces when we got back home. Charles was in front of our door waiting. He had just got back from the army and had no place else to go. Steve was so surprised and happy. So was I. Little did we know that this happiness will turn hell's fire in our mouths. The attraction to Charlie began almost immediately. There was something different about him. I could not place my hands on it, but Charlie was not the same boy we grew up with. He had grown big, very big, with bulgy arms, a Viking's beard, a mysterious smile, and groins that were always visible within the shorts he wore around the house. This version of Charlie had all I wanted in a man and more, and I would not lie. I wanted to have a taste of him. However, my darling Steve was the center of my world at the time. We were inseparable. I would not hurt him like that, not with anyone, most definitely not with his best friend, who happens to be one of my best friends too. With that in mind, I killed all the vile thoughts I had about Charlie. It was not going to happen. Or so I thought. My affair with Charles began in a way that, thinking about it now, breaks my heart. Steve had traveled for a business trip, leaving me in the house with Charles. He had not been able to secure a job yet. So, his routine was to work out, eat, read a book, and watch me clean the house. It was annoying watching him watch me clean the house without as much as offering to help me out. Even so annoying is the fact that he would sit on the couch like he owned the place, watch TV without paying, leave the refrigerator open after him, and he won't clean up after him. Charles was a bag of undesirable hygiene. But his strong arms and those bulgy large unders were more desirable than any negative traits he had. Charles had just got back from the gym that day. I was at home too, probably called in sick at work or something, and was on the couch in the living room watching my favorite TV show. He walked past me and the smell of sweat mixed with his cologne filled the air. It was the most awkwardly satisfying smell I had ever perceived. "What are you watching?" he asked with his deep army voice. I pointed at the title of the TV show, not wanting to engage him in a conversation. He stood for a while, and maybe he got interested in the show, sat down to watch with me. Despite all the couches in the living room, Charles decided to sit on the same couch as me. He lifted my legs gently, sat, and put my legs on his unders area. That was the beginning of the end for me. A million thoughts filled my mind at that moment. What is going on? Is this right? But his hardness is so hot. Subconsciously, I began to move my leg on his crotch, slowly and softly. He knew this, but did not say anything. He just had that smirk on his face. He had me where he wanted me and was not going to let go that easily. I continued to move some more, and when it was becoming intense, Charlie tapped my leg, stood, and left. I had never felt so embarrassed in my entire life. Charlie left me hanging and acted like nothing just happened. The tap brought me back to my reality. I have Steve. I have known Charlie my whole life. I can't do this with him. Plus, he doesn't want me that way. I thought I was beside myself with the thought of cheating on Steve, but really, it was Charlie leaving at the time that he left that made me sad. I wiped the slate clean and decided to go apologize to Charlie. At least that would mean I knew what I almost started was wrong. Making my way to Charlie's room, I rehearsed what I would say when I got there. I mouthed the words calmly till I got to the door of his room, knocked, and without waiting to hear a response, opened the door, saw what I saw, and things spiraled out of my control. You know those scenes in movies where everyone stands stock still, amazed or scared? This was the same thing that happened when I entered Charlie's room after knocking. Charlie had just got out of the bathroom and was completely remembering now, and I'm almost wet again. His toy was completely turgid like one high on Viagra. It was clear that I was going to have him. It was clear that he had me already. We stared at each other for what seemed like forever before he pulled me inside. "So, what next?" he said, still without clothes. I could not answer. I began to whimper, to shiver, visibly. He held me close with his huge, strong arm, pulled me into his wall of a body and kissed me. His lips, I will never forget their tastes, were warm, and his tongue knew their business in my mouth. It was like he had been waiting for this day all his life. We kissed till we were almost out of breath and he stopped. I could not look him in the eye. I was too ashamed to admit that my hands were actually stroking his hardness. I was too sad to know that Charlie could have me, and I would not feel any remorse. Steve was kind to me, loved me with every fiber of his being. But here I am about to be immensely pleasured by our best friend. I was too embarrassed to admit that at that moment, none of what I thought mattered, not even Steve's kindness and love. Charlie took me slowly. He took me in without a word, without remorse on his face. I still remember the smirk on his face, more like, "Finally, I have you." It is a pain I would give the world to experience again. There was no argument, no fuss, just intense lovemaking, in different tunes. Charlie sang me the music of the world and I danced to it. Slowly, then faster and faster till I reached the climax, until we reached our climax. Even after this climax, Charlie did not stop. I was shocked at how quick his pike gained strength again. It was quick. I was going to lose my mind. "Charlie," I called out intently, clawed at his chest, held onto him as he choked me and pounded his best friend's wife. Pounded me till I could not breathe. Charlie owned me that day, and I knew it was going to be the first of many poundings to come. And I was not wrong. Our affair went on for almost a month. Even after Steve got back, Charlie always found ways to bring me to his bed. It was not like he could not get other girls, but the excitement that came with pounding me under my husband's nose, that was the joy for him. Although Steve felt we were losing connection, he never suspected I was cheating on him. Sometimes he would apologize, take me out, and make memories. On such days, I would vow not to break his heart with Charlie again. That vow never stood till the next day. I was obsessed with Charlie, and having him in the house only made it worse. Well, I will soon find out that having him out of the house would make it easier and more intense. Charlie got a job with a car company as a salesman after spending over 3 months with us and moved out 2 weeks after. Steve had gone with him to his new place to help him set the place up. The day he moved out was an emotional day for me. I don't know why, but I did not want him to go. That night we had what I thought was going to be our last pounding, and it was very intense. Charlie had booked a hotel a little away from the house and called me to come over. I raced to the place like I had an emergency. We pounded and pounded till it was almost midnight. This was when Steve's suspicion grew wings and began to fly. He had called me countlessly, called my colleagues at work, and anyone who was remotely attached to me. When I finally showed up that night, there were no stories to tell. He did not speak out about his suspicions, but I think my face gave me away. Steve and I began to grow distant from that day. You would think that after that night, I would put an end to the madness. But no, it only became worse. Charlie now had a place, so we could do it wherever and whenever. On days when Steve had to go on a business trip, I would go to Charlie's, and we would have the days to ourselves. I could not believe that I had gotten so attached to Charlie and his rough pounding. Things were going smoothly until karma decided to pay me back in my own coin. Steve had told me that he was going on a business trip that day. He left the house at 5 a.m. as usual. I called Charlie and we made plans for the days Steve was to be away. I packed my bags and drove off. I noticed a blue Toyota was following me, but I did not really pay it any attention. Who could be following me? What would they even want? There were no answers to my questions, so I continued driving till I got to Charlie's house. He was already waiting outside for me. We hugged and shared one of our signature welcome kisses before he carried me into the house and straight to the bedroom. In his moment of lust, Charlie had forgotten to close the door behind him. Things would go downhill from there. Steve had rented a car and tailed me to Charlie's place. He was so shocked when he saw Charlie kiss me so hard and casually. Still in disbelief, he decided to come inside. It was a struggle for him, but he soon decided to move. Charlie was under me when Steve found us. It was to be the saddest moment of his life. I saw Steve first, even in my ecstasy, and pushed Charlie away. We all stood staring at one another. And before we knew what was happening, Steve had pulled out a gun. It all happened in a blink. All I can remember are the 2 shots and the 2 bodies falling down and my screaming. Steve shot Charlie, and before I could say or do anything, pointed the gun at me, then redirected it at his head, and the trigger went off. I was not prosecuted as Steve's thumbprints were still on the gun, but I lost a part of me that day, a part I don't think I can ever regain. Want to see more like this? Then click on the video you are seeing on your screen now.